Hello everybody, my name is Darko Vukovic, and in this demo I wanted to showcase some of the development I did on top of Apaleo using Poly, and introduce some of you to the idea of Poly who might have never seen it before. So in this demo I basically took the Apaleo APIs, we trained them to Poly, and then we used those trained APIs to build new microservices on top, 5 to be exact. We also developed some client functions, which are basically, you can think of them as utility functions that are helpful in the SDK. So I'll just give you a quick overview of what I did in VS Code and some of the experiences with Poly, and then I'll show you the functions in use. So the first feature I'd like to introduce you to is our Poly AI Assistant. And here you can ask it questions about trained functions. So for example, I could say something like, how do I get a list of properties from Apaleo? And what the AI assistant does is it basically looks against the catalog of trained functions, and then it goes ahead and finds the right function for you, and then basically prints it out for you. So you can see here that it wrote out an example for us that basically first defined some interfaces, and then it went ahead and actually it wrote us a new async function, which is actually a really good starting point for creating new microservices, and I'll show you that in just a second. And within that function, it basically used the PolyAPI inventory properties get, and this is how you find the actual inventories of hotels. So I have an example here actually where I do use that function. And you can see that right here on line 51, it's the same function being used with the same parameters. So I would say this is a really good starting point. And I'll just go ahead and put it in a test file, create a new file here where we can paste it in. And the first thing we should note is that it's actually syntactically 100% correct. My guess is this function would execute no problem. It's actually a very well constructed example of how to use it. I would have to go through and fill some parameters in, so there's a little bit of work. I'll go ahead and skip that for now, but I'd like to actually show you the second feature that's really important with Poly, and that's the actual library that powers these functions. So when you train Poly, we auto-generate functions for you, and then you can generate an SDK in TypeScript, Java, or Python. .NET would be the next language we'll add support for, and this SDK will include a bunch of functions like this one. And what's nice about these functions is you can actually mouse over them, see a description of them, see what each of the parameters are, an explanation of maybe how to use them, and then you can also go into the functions and see the exact object models that you're dealing with. And that's what actually allows us to power experiences like this where we have this return statement, but maybe I don't want to do a full return just yet. Maybe I want to return a subset of the information. So I could do something like const response equals, and then down here I would actually have res dot, and you'll see that we have the actual full data model coming back from Apaleo to work with. And so this one's an array, and so you can see it's got the exact object model. And that's really what the benefit of Poly is that as a developer, I don't have to go ahead and read documentations and search for functions, etc. If Poly's been trained on those systems, you can ask the AI assistant to find the function, you can use the library to understand the exact interface, and you're off running without having to go kind of study the details of any particular system. Now the second biggest area that Poly helps you with is not just API consumption, but actually producing new services. So I'll go ahead and close this example, and I'll take you and show you the get properties example here. So what a new microservice is it's really just a new asynchronous function that you then deploy to Poly. Poly stands it up as a serverless function, and our Knative infrastructure manages it for you and basically scales it and does deployment and revisioning and all kinds of good stuff. So here, what you generally do is very much like what the AI produced. And by the way, we kind of guide the AI to produce this structure. because it's actually super helpful when building new microservices. You would define your own interface. You would then declare a function with its own signature. And then you probably do some validation to make sure that the data being passed in is correct and fits your needs. After that, you can go ahead and actually usually obtain a token, authenticate the user, throw an error if they're not authenticated. And then this is where you would declare maybe some configurations that you would then use when actually calling the API. So here we call the API, we get the inventory, we get the properties, we put it in the property response, and then we go ahead and map it and transform the data to the structure we want and return it back to whoever the caller is. Now there's too many combinatorial uses of this to really go into in this demo, but just know you can expose it as a new function, you can expose it as an API, it could be triggered based on an event. So there's a lot of usage for these server functions that you deploy. So when you're ready to deploy it, you can basically run a command and that'll package this and deploy it to the Poly server. And I've done 5 of these. I've done one for getting offers, getting tokens, creating a reservation, checking a guest in, and I'll show you all those in action in just a little bit. The last thing I'd like to touch on is you can also create client-side functions. So for example, I have 2 of them here. One is to calculate the time difference between the arrival and departure. There was a point in my code where it was actually beneficial to just know how many days somebody's staying as a number. And so I wrote a reusable function that basically takes in the arrival date, departure date, calculates the difference, and returns it. This has nothing to do with calling APIs or anything. This is just algorithmic, math, let's call it. And what's nice about this though is that I can actually take this function and run another command, --client, to deploy this as a client-side function of Poly. And what that means is that when you generate your library, it's included in the library, it executes on the client side that has imported that library, and it's just available to you as a helpful function that you don't have to write the logic for as a developer consuming these APIs. So my guess is that over time we would identify a lot of interesting use cases where as a developer, programming against Apaleo, but really any other system as well, where there's just these functions you'd like to have handy in any project that you're working on. And for that, client functions are super helpful. Great, and so what I did is I went through and deployed all these functions to the service, and then I used another endpoint to create an AI agent that uses these functions. Again, I've done many videos on that, so I'll just refer you to our Building Microservices and AI Agents track if you're interested in learning more. So what I'll do at this point is I'll go ahead and switch over to the AI agent and show it in action. So here we are in Apaleo. I just wanted to show that Jimmy Wilson was the last reservation we received based on created date time. And so now we'll go to the AI agent and we'll create a new reservation. So here we are within ChatGPT. I've got the plugins model enabled, and I've got my Poly Hotels, which was generated, enabled as well. And keep in mind that this is just one entry into the AI model. You can also access it via an API. So everything I'm doing here, you could create as a text messaging experience versus using WhatsApp or SMS or other messaging applications. You can also embed it inside your own web app or mobile app. You own that experience. So the AI agent is just a communicative thinking process that allows you to have this experience. And so here I'll say something like, hello, do you have any hotels in Berlin? And again, with these custom functions, you can structure it however you want. So you have full control over this flow. So you can see it found one hotel. We're gonna actually peek inside this bubble to see all the data. So you can see that what it did is it searched for country code Germany, because that's how the hotels are structured. But then it was able to interpret that, hey, this hotel is in Berlin and this other hotel is in Munich. So I'm only gonna tell you about the one in Berlin because you asked me about Berlin. Had I asked about Germany, it would present the Munich one. So I can then say something like, for example, just to show that, I could say, are there any other hotels Germany? And you'll notice that here it doesn't even make a second call out because it's already searched for Germany. So it has the full context. So it says, oh yeah, there's also Munich as well. So I can then say, does the hotel in Berlin have a room for a little person tonight? So you can see it's got a response here. I'd like to also point out that the beauty of the AI agent is that it speaks every language. So I can have this conversation in Spanish, Italian, Chinese, Hindi, like you have full control, right? So it really caters itself nicely to a global audience that like to be able to get information about your properties without, without a person on the line. Cool, so here we have it. Now I'd say, okay, that looks good, What do you need? Need to book it. Okay, so we'll give it my first name here. I'll just make something up. I'll say I'm Henry James hj@com. Okay, something like that, and then the address we'll go ahead and put Okay, so you can see we've got a successful reservation. It prints back the reservation ID, tells me I can use this to check into the hotel. So I'll go ahead and just show it in Apaleo. And here, if I refresh, we can see that Henry James is at the top now. We can see the full information about the source, right? So you can then take this further and order room service, ask for services, ask questions about the property. Like I said, you most likely want to embed this into your own website or your own mobile applications. But yeah, there's a ton of opportunities. So I hope you've enjoyed this demo, and yeah, please reach out if you'd like to talk more. With Poly, we can definitely help you with system-to-system integrations, building new applications, or building new digital experiences like this. So we'd love to hear from you. We'd love your feedback, and good to meet you all in the community, and thank you for watching the video.